Hey, it's Russell Graves here, and I'm in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and the sunrises and sunsets around here are beautiful. But one of the problems you have from a classical landscape standpoint is you don't have that big visual foreground and background. It's all background here, and the mountains are far in the distance, and it's hard to create a landscape photo in a classical sense like you think about when you read tutorials or watch tutorials online. And so how do you handle that? Well, one of my favorite ways of handling kind of big landscapes is to think about doing a panoramic. And if you've never done a panoramic before, they're really easy. One of the first things you have to do is get your camera set right. And what I mean by that is one of the first things I'll do is set my lens in manual focus so I can manually focus myself. So that way if a tree limb or something's sticking out, it's not going to refocus. You're going to focus on one point in the distance and hold that focus all the way through the series of photographs. The second thing you're going to do is put your camera in vertical orientation. And that's a little bit counterintuitive because you would think a panoramic shot, you'd shoot horizontal, but you actually shoot vertically. And so what I'm going to do is as I'm taking these pictures, I'm going to take my first shot, and in that first shot, I'm going to look for an element on the right side of the frame that when I take my second shot, it can be in the left part of my frame in the second shot. So in other words, I'm taking a series of shots of the landscape, and they're going to be overlapped by about 30%. And then the third thing I'm going to do is just shoot my landscape left to right. And I'm going to try to take as much as I can because it's easy to capture as much as you can now, and you can always edit it out later. So once I do those three steps, I set my lens in manual mode. I'm usually going to shoot about 70 millimeter. Or it really depends on the landscape, but most of the time I'm shooting at 70 millimeter. I'm going to put my camera in a vertical orientation, and I'm going to take a series of pictures overlapping each one by about 30% of the whole landscape I want to capture. And then once I've done that, I can get back into Lightroom and be able to stitch them all together. So once I've imported my pictures into Lightroom, making a panoramic image is pretty easy. If you'll notice, I've already pre-selected this series of images. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pictures in this selection. You can see that as I go from left to right, there's a little bit of overlap in each picture. And again, they're all shot vertically because it'll give you more resolution in the end than if you shoot these pictures horizontally. So you just take a little slice of the scene, have a little bit of overlap, and then from this step forward, you can combine them and make them into a panoramic image. So from here, all I'm going to do is select the first image in the series, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and select the last image in the series, and then it'll select everything else in between them. So once I've got these pictures selected, I'm ready to go to my next step, which is to click on the photo at the top, and then Photo Merge, and then Panorama. And you can see here the shortcut is Shift M, but I'm going to go ahead and scroll through the menus. And when I click on Panorama, it will take just a minute and go ahead and give me a preview. Now you can see in this preview that the image is curved because I'm taking just a slice out of a 360-degree sphere that I'm trying to photograph. And so Lightroom actually lets you look at different projections on this. If we look over on the right side, we've got 3 different projections from which to choose. We've got spherical, and it'll take a minute to transform this picture and give us a preview. You can see there it kind of flattened out the image. Cylindrical, you can see it took out the top and bottom warp out of it. And then if we don't want to fill the edges, we can always just hit auto crop, which essentially does the same thing. The next thing I'm going to do here is click this auto settings, and what the auto settings does is it kind of it's just like hitting auto in the exposure settings in the develop module. When you click auto settings, it'll just do automatic color adjustments to your pictures and try to adjust things like exposure and as well as the black point, the white point, the saturation, all that stuff. It'll go ahead and do that for you automatically. And I'll always click that because I like to see what it looks like. And then the last thing I'm going to do is create a stack. And what that does is once my panorama is created, it will all those individual images it took to make the panorama, it will stack those beneath, almost like stacking a deck of cards. It'll stack those images beneath my panoramic image. So when I'm ready, I'm going to hit merge, and then you can see up here it's creating the panorama in the background, and then once it's done, it'll show me the final image on my screen here. Okay, so here we go. Depending on how complicated or how big the image is, will dictate how long it takes your computer to go ahead and process it. But once this kind of loads up, this is a pretty big image, and I'll show you that in a second. So sometimes it takes just a little bit to load, but once it loads up, you've got your panorama that you created from multiple pictures. Yeah, you can see here the dimensions of this picture overall are 18,483 pixels wide by 6,213 pixels tall. So that's an enormously big image when you look at it. And you can see shot at 1/200th of a second at f5, 70 millimeters, ISO 400. You know, all the ways I told you how to shoot this. But once you get it in panoramic mode, then you can start working on it from there, and then do all your normal fixes that you normally would in Lightroom. If you notice here, the sliders are already moved. That's because if you'll remember when it was showing me the preview of the panoramic, I clicked the auto setting, which gave me an auto exposure and auto tone, and did all the other adjustments. But from here, you know, if I want to, I can put a graduated neutral density filter into the sky, make the sky a little bit darker. Oops, wrong one. Make the sky a little bit darker. I even use the coloring to add a little color to it. I'm going to take that out though and put something a little more natural like that one. You can further make your adjustments to the image, bringing the blacks down, bringing the whites up, whatever, you know, shadows, highlights, all that other stuff, whatever you want to do. But anyway, it's a simple process to make a panoramic, and it just takes a few clicks. And really, it's that simple. It's just doing those same basic steps over and over again. Putting your camera in manual focus, setting your lens to about 70 millimeters or so, and shooting a series of overlapping images in vertical format. And they're going to overlap about 30% again. And then once you're done, those simple steps using Lightroom to stitch them all together, it's going to make a dynamic way to capture a landscape. And I think it's going to change the way you see the world.